Here are the exercises for lesson 3.1, which was our first lesson on trigonometry. It had the unit circle, sine and cosine. The exercises I will work are from section 5.2 and OpenStax Precalculus 2E, and they are listed here. So as usual with these exercises videos, I recommend you try them first, then you can come back to this video where I'll go over the problems. Let's get started. 31 and 32, we just need to state the reference angle for each angle. I chose these because these are only examples in this exercises sheet where we have a negative angle. So maybe let's begin by drawing a unit circle to use where we think about what's going on for both of these. Unit circle and unit circle. Well, I can also draw my initial side and draw my initial side. Okay, very nice. Well, if I think about these before sketching, you notice that what's close to minus 11 pi over 3 is minus 12 pi over 3. Minus 12 pi over 3, this is negative 4 pi. From this, though, I can say something about my angle. I see that minus 11 pi over 3. This is minus 4 pi plus pi over 3. Now, immediately, I will graph it in just a moment, but immediately I can write down the reference angle. The reference angle is pi over 3. Now we will graph. Okay, so here we go, initial side. We go, there is minus 2 pi. There is here minus 4 pi, but then we add pi over 3. So it's up here. Okay, this is in quadrant 1, in fact, the terminal side. So let me sketch that, where the reference angle is pi over 3. Okay, this was 31. Now 32 is very similar. We just have to observe that the closest thing is minus 8 pi over 4. This is minus 2 pi. And then from here, we can notice that minus 7 pi over 4 is minus 2 pi plus pi over 4. And immediately, very similar to the one above, we can read off the reference angle. It's pi over 4. But let's also sketch this one on our graph. So we start here, initial side, and we move negative. So negative 2 pi takes me to here. Then I add pi over 4. That would be here. So this is my angle. Once again, this angle, terminal side, is in quadrant 1. So I will also write it here. The reference angle is pi over 4. Okay. Well, let's move on to where we need to calculate sine and cosine. We have 3 different ones we will work through here. But just like in the last few examples, I want to draw unit circles to really think about where this angle has its terminal side. Well, 46, you note that 3 pi over 3 is pi. And so this gives us that 4 pi over 3 is pi plus pi over 3. Okay, so this tells us our reference angle. Maybe I'll write this below. The reference angle is pi over 3. But let's draw it because it looks a little bit different than the ones on the last page. First you go pi, this is here, and then we add one more pi over 3. This is going to be here. Terminal side, this is in quadrant 3. That was part of the question asked. And reference angle pi over 3. Well, now we can just write down the cosine and the sine using everything we have calculated so far. We use the reference angle. What do we know about pi over 3? Pi over 3, the cosine would be 1/2, and the sine would be square root 3 over 2. But now we have to pay attention to the quadrant. We are in quadrant 3 where both the cosine and the sine are negative. So I need to put negative signs in front of both of these. This was 46. 48, is for the angle 5 pi over 6. When I see 5 pi over 6, I think 6 pi over 6. So let's write this down. 6 pi over 6 is pi. So the angle that I'm interested in, which is 5 pi over 6, well, this is pi minus pi over 6. And so my reference angle, you see, will be pi over 6. Now, let's draw it here. We go pi, this is to here, but then subtract pi over 6. So this will be up here, quadrant 2. Let's graph it, then we will write the quadrant. It's going to be here, which is, as I said, quadrant 2. Now, you notice in this quadrant, cosine is negative and sine is positive. That's going to help us. So cosine 5 pi over 6, this is one I'm interested in. I'm also interested in the sine 5 pi over 6. With a reference angle pi over 6, I know that the cosine pi over 6 is square root 3 over 2. I know the sine pi over 6 is 1/2. But then, as I was mentioning, cosine in this quadrant is negative and sine is positive. So this gives us the cosine and sine for 5 pi over 6. Now we have 7 pi over 4. Well, very similar to the ones above, I'm going to think 8 pi over 4. And this is 2 pi. So my angle, you notice this is 8 pi over 4 minus pi over 4. 7 pi over 4 is 2 pi minus pi over 4. And this tells me my reference angle. My reference angle is pi over 4. But let's draw this, okay? We start here, go all the way around, that's 2 pi, but then we have to back up, pi over 4. So we are here. There is the terminal side. You notice this is quadrant 4. We can use this to find the cosine, 7 pi over 4, and to find the sine of 7 pi over 4. With a reference angle of pi over 4, this gives cosine and sine. Pi over 4, well, they're both square root 2 over 2. But now we have to pay attention to our quadrant. In quadrant 4, cosine is positive and sine is negative. So maybe let me back this one up. Put a minus sign. Sine will be negative and cosine's positive. So here we have the values for cosine and sine for the angle 7 pi over 4. Now we have a different type of question here. We are told cosine of t is 1 over 7 and t is in quadrant 4, find the sine. Well, this goes back to how in the lesson I found the values of sine and cosine for, say, pi over 4, pi over 3, pi over 6, and we use the fact that cosine squared plus sine squared is 1. Now, here we're told the cosine of t is 1 over 7. So we have 1 over 7 squared plus sine squared is 1. We can use this to solve for sine squared. This is 1 over 49. And then we have sine squared. T is 1. So the sine squared of t is going to be 1 minus 1 over 49. Or let's see, 48 over 49. Well, here's where we have to use what quadrant we are in. Let me draw a little unit circle. We are in quadrant 4. Here the sign is negative, and so I know here my answer will be that the sine of t will be the negative square root of this, 48 over 49. Now I can take one small step here in simplifying, and maybe I will. I can write this as negative. In my numerator, I have square root of 48. In the denominator, I would have square root of 49, which is 7. So here's my answer. This is the answer. This is the sine for this angle T. 51, this is very similar to the one above, except T is in the first quadrant, and we're told the cosine. We want to find the sine. So we know that cosine squared T plus sine squared T is 1. Now let's find the sine. Cosine T is 2 over 9. So we'll have 2 over 9 squared plus sine squared is 1. This becomes 4 divided by, well, 9 squared is 81. And then we have plus sine squared T is 1. Just like the problem above, I can subtract. So I get sine squared T. Maybe I'll do this one in 2 steps. This would be 81 minus 4 over 81. And 81 minus 4 is 77. 77. So sine squared T is 77 over 81. Very nice. The only thing left to do to figure out the sine of T is use the fact that we are in quadrant 1 and the sine is positive in quadrant 1. So the sine of T is positive square root of 77 over 81. Which I can write similar to the above as the square root of 77 divided by, well, the square root of 81, which is 9. This is my answer here to 51. Last question is 53, and it's very similar to the 2 that we did. The difference, well, we're in quadrant 3. We're also told the sine value, and then we want to find the cosine of this angle T. Well, once again, cosine squared plus sine squared is 1. We have used this multiple times, not only in the lesson, but also in the exercises. It's a very important identity, trying to stress that to all students. So this says cosine squared plus, here's sine, and then we square, will be 1. We have cosine squared T plus 1 over 16 is 1. Now we subtract. Cosine squared T will be 15 over 16. It's 16 minus 1 over 16, okay? Quadrant 3 though, quadrant 3, you see both the sine and the cosine are negative. And so the cosine here will be negative the square root of 15 over 16, which is negative the square root of 15 divided by 4. This would be my answer here. So these were the exercises. We did a lot with reference angles, and using that sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. Thank you so much.